Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Candid Conversations. I am your host, Cynthia Milton. This show is designed to inspire, inform, and uplift you. And my guest today will do just that. She is a mover and shaker in the blues and the music industry. Her influence reaches locally, nationally, and even internationally. She's a voting member of the Grammy Recording Academy. She is a history maker, a wall breaker, a glass ceiling breaker, a cultural shaker. As a woman who came of age in the strict confines of society and restrictions in mid-century Mississippi in the 50s and 60s, some would say she's a most unlikely candidate. But this petite, middle-class Caucasian woman in this male-dominated, rooted industry, deep in African-American roots, conquered and created her own way. And along the path and in the process, she became an advocate for equality and provided some opportunities for others. Please welcome to Candid Conversations, Miss Carol Marble, Blues Society founder and the owner of Mississippi Delta Records. Hello, what an honor it is to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm wondering who that person is that you were talking about. But it has been a fun career, what I've been doing, and I love to talk about it. I love to talk about the people that I've worked with and this exciting journey that I've been on. But so thank you for allowing me to do that and to be able to hopefully inspire some other women and men to do what their dream is and follow their dream.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's one of the things we aspire to do here at Candid Conversations. And so you have represented artists in the music industry. As I said, you created a record company. You're a voting member of the Grammy. You don't meet those every day. And you got started when you were 57 years old?
I think
when most people were kind of wrapping things up and retiring, you go down this path, this unbeaten path, and just chart your own way. Well,
life is an adventure. And when doors open, you really should just walk through them. You never know where it's going to lead or what's on the other side, but it is an adventure. And I had an opportunity, and it opened, and it sounded exciting and fun, and so I started out, not knowing anything, but I depended on the people to teach me. I did not know anything, but the musicians, the people in the business said, you don't have to know anything. We will teach you what you need to know. So the story about it takes a village. Yeah, you really need people. And if you have support group, family, friends, and people that help you, then yes, you can do so many things that you think you may never be able to do. But you learn as you go, and that's what happened to me. I knew zero, nothing at all. And so I don't know if that's courageous or stupid, but whichever, somewhere in there, there's a happy medium, I guess.
There absolutely is a level of courage, because when we don't know how to do things, a lot of people never get to it because the fear paralyzes them. The unknown paralyzes them. So there has to be a level of courage and confidence to move forward. And so that's what helped you chart that path, that uncharted territory, and you were very successful at it. So let's just get into a little of your story. So you had this life before. You and your husband had worked at various places across the country and across the world. You've done some teaching and some different things, but you hadn't done anything in the music industry. And your husband's career path leads you to Indianola, Mississippi. And that's where it kind of all started, in the heart of the birthplace of the blues and the Mississippi. So tell us about how that started.
Well, like you said, it started when I moved to Indianola, and I really, Indianola is another country in many ways. We love Indianola. We're proud of the Delta. The Delta is such a unique place. It's a place that so many creative people come from, musicians, writers, artists of all types. So when I went there...
Not the least of who is B.B. King.
B.B. King, that's right. I moved to the hometown of B.B. King. And I think that B.B. King, which I was fortunate enough to get to know, and my bands all opened for him for many years, that was exciting. I thought, okay, I'm going to get to see B.B. King. And in Indianola, you have the historic Club Ebony, which has been there for many years, and famous musicians, where it was part of the Chitlin circuit, would come through there. But in Indianola, every Sunday night, there was a blues show, and a musician named David Lee Durham would perform, and David would also open for BB when he came. So my husband and I decided, well, we'll go down and see the show. It was wonderful. It became our Sunday night thing to do. So when I'm down there watching David, there were a few people from Europe that would occasionally come. You would see a speckling, 4 or 5 people, and they were just entranced. And I
By
thought,
speckling, you mean a speckling of Caucasian people.
well, yes. Okay. Caucasian.
It's candid conversations.
It's candid conversations. Yes, exactly. We were, Ron and I were there, maybe 1 or 2 other Caucasians, but we would, of course, spot the Europeans. They were so excited, and they had spent lots of time, effort, and money, to make their way all the way to the Mississippi
Delta.
The blues is highly respected and regarded in Europe. So they would love David Lee, and I would watch this. And so I asked David one day, what do you want to do, David? I see all these people coming to, He said, I want to go over the water, and I want to die a good man. I said, well, I know you've got one of those. Okay, you're a good man. Going over the water meant he wanted to go to Europe. And David, he had had a difficult life. He'd been raised out on the plantations picking cotton from the time he was, and he never went to school. He had a father that was abusive, so he had a terrible life. He didn't read or write, but music was just oozed from him. So he had this untarnished sound. He had never been away from the Delta, which I thought in itself was unique.
This untarnished sound. That's interesting.
Authentic. You couldn't get any more authentic than that. He had not been away from his roots. And so many musicians left in the migrations. They left the Delta and went to Chicago, but he was always there. So he had this purely wonderful sound. So he wanted to do that, and I said, I don't know much about it. I don't know anything really, but I think for you to be able to go, you're going to have an album, something that you can promote yourself with, and I'll help you. Those
Even
famous
though you had
words.
no experience.
Yes, the famous words that can get us into lots of trouble or whatever, So we decided that we would, he wanted me to be his manager, which I knew nothing about, but I said, okay, fine. I know how to have a business card printed up, and I know how to start a business. So I got Mississippi Delta Blues started, which is the umbrella company for what I do. And I said, let's see what we can do about an album. Well, one of his members in the band, Dr. Alfonso Sanders, was also associated with Valley State University over all of their music programs. And BB had endowed the university with a studio, which they were in the process of starting. So I asked Alfonso, and he said, well, we'll come down and record him live there at the club since we don't have it together, which is what they did. So they recorded him live, and then I got the big box with the mix of all of this, and they told me what to do next. Now you have to have it mixed. Well, everybody wanted to help David, so it wasn't a difficult thing, and I say that everyone baby walked me through getting this album. Then I had to do the cover on it, so I had to get how do you do a cover on an album for dummies book and try to figure that out. But eventually we got the album, and I sent it off to Europe to some people that they had recommended that might
and
be
they love
interested.
it.
They loved it.
And they want him to come.
They wanted
and he
him
says,
to come.
you got to go too.
That's right. He said, no, I'm not going without Carol. And that was fine. That was good, So David and I went to Italy, and when we were in Italy, the people from Lucerne came and previewed him, and Switzerland, and that's a very prestigious event. Yeah, one of the most prestigious in Europe. festivals, and they invited me to come back with the entire band about 6 weeks later, and we went back, to do that, and that's how I got started. And then the word was out on the street, and then some other musicians approached me that had moved back from Chicago to Mississippi about representing them, and I said, I know nothing about what I'm doing. They said, we'll teach you. So that's how my journey started. They all taught me what I needed to know, and it took a few years of learning and working on their albums, and they were very generous because they allowed me to come into the studios and have input about the music, name some of the songs, and then later I was able to help write songs with Jimmy Mays. And so to be in the recording academy, a voting member, you have to have creative input. So I got in as a note writer and now as a music writer. So that's how my journey started, but it happened because I moved to Mississippi Delta.
So it's really fascinating. You literally were a fan, and out of being a fan and your desire to help this person fulfill their dream of going across the water, you got to have an album. Out of that, you become a record owner, producer, and you become a management person, an artist manager, and then other people began to gravitate towards you and say, I want you to manage us too. And you said it was because they thought that you had integrity. Talk about that.
They wanted someone they could trust. They had been the ones that came to me had been associated with people that stole their music, took their rights from them. The story, everybody knows the backstory behind all of that. So to trust someone in the business is very important, and they felt like they could trust me. They were willing to trust me with their careers. They could see where I guess my heart is in helping David and all of that, and they were willing to teach me because of that level of trust and friendship that we forged between us. But they had been so mistreated, and we all know the stories about what happened to the blues musicians when they left, the social issues that went on. But then in the music business, you had the people stealing everybody's music, and they're taking their money and giving them a pittance of what they deserved. So they had many of them were coming back. There was a period of time when it was tremendously wide open in Chicago. You had big clubs, people would line up for blocks to get in them. Then the music changed, and we went into the 60s, and people moved away from having that great interest. And so what do the musicians do when they come home? Mississippi people come home when things go bad for them. We don't lose our sense of home. We know where it is, so we head back home.
It's a safe harbor.
It's a safe harbor. So we had several that were returning and trying to figure out what I do next, especially, the major name people were out there established. But if you're not a major level player in many regards, or your genre has changed, what do? You come home, you lick your wounds, you figure out what I do next and how do I do it. Well, the reason I started the company, of course we know I wanted to help David, but the reason we got the record label and all that is if you are a musician, you need a record label. You need a manager. And then you go from there. Well, you can't get a manager unless you have a record label. You can't get a record label unless you have a manager. So I said, okay, we'll just do all of them.
Wow.
we'll just do it all and figure it out as we go. So I said, we'll just have the record label. We'll put it all under one thing, and therefore you have a manager, you have an agent, you have a record label, you have everything. It's like a one-stop shop.
From the woman that was in her late 50s who had never done it before. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Now something else, and that's kind of your character. when you see a need, it seems like you try to figure out, you're a problem solver and you just attack it and just figure it out along the way, because you and your husband attended this major international blues festival in Memphis when you were in Indianola, and you noted that there were no Mississippi Delta bluesmen there, the birthplace of the blues, right up the street, and there were none there, and you all were disturbed about that, and you did something about it. Talk to me about that.
Well, we went to Memphis. We'd never been to that venue, and we got there. We'd been invited by a man that was from Oregon, and when we get there, there were hundreds of bands there, hundreds of performing groups from all over the world, from Australia, Europe, just South America. It just goes on. And I'm looking around, and there is not one black musician to be found. There were 2 or 3. I eventually figured that out, but they were from California. But there were none from the Mississippi Delta. Well, you had to have a blues society and have a regional challenge to get a band to submit it to go and perform. We didn't have blues societies in Mississippi. So when I found that out, I thought, this is not right. We are I'm a history major, and I know a little bit about Mississippi history and about our culture, and I said, there's something wrong with this picture, We have these musicians, and they're here. I know. I've seen them. I'm working with them. So I found out how to start a blues society, and it was real simple, $100 in an application. And I got that and called back to home to the Indianola to a couple of people, and by the time we left Memphis and got to Indianola, we had a blues society formed. The next week we had our bylaws all set up, and we sent blues musicians up there the next year, and we won. We won. Even Brent won. We won everything. We just tore them up, So we put a lot of fear into them, and we won the International Blues several years in a row. And the Blues Society in Indianola, I think they're going into their 19th year, I believe. So we've had major success in that area. And then we started the one in Jackson, the Central Mississippi Blues Society. So out of that, just planting that seed, other people took it and ran with it over the years. I haven't been that terribly involved in it, but, people could see how much fun, and we had this great resource to offer literally to the world, and it has become huge in Mississippi with the tourism of people coming in here. They do know now that we have a live music scene in our state, as well as our novelist and writer, all of that. We have that music, and
you have been a very important part of that happening, and as you said, with the international festival, which was that big deal, and now opening the doors for the people who kind of birthed this music, Mississippi bluesmen. As you look back on that kind of work and the doors you've opened and the things you've established, what are your feelings and thoughts about having to being an integral part of that?
Oh wow, that's an interesting question. It's so personal to me because the people I've worked with, they're family. I was given some advice early on when I got into it, and they said, if you get into it, don't go into it because it's a business. Go into it because they're your family. And everybody that I've worked with, they've stayed in my homes, we've traveled together, I've loved on their grandchildren, they've loved on me. That's the relationship. How do you define what that means to you, when you're talking about family? And so for me, it's a very important part of my life. It truly is.
It's your purpose.
Mhm.
It's your call.
Mhm.
And as she talked about family, not only has it been her musical family that's helped her navigate the way through this journey, it's also the love of her life, her husband, Ron Marble. And on part 2 of this interview, we're going to bring him in and talk to him. And they have their own incredible journey. For years before getting into the blues, they worked hard, got the American dream, and then in their mid-40s, lost everything. How did they start over and move forward? We'll tell you about that on the next Candid Conversation. Thank you for joining us. I'm Cynthia Maxey Milton. Have a great day.